Let's keep things moving here. For this next portion, I'm really excited to bring to the stage Tim Bako of the Ethereum Foundation and Pooja Ranjan of Etherworld and Ethereum Cat Herders. They're going to be talking about the Ethereum Roadmap. Tim, Pooja, are you coming on live?
Thank you for the introduction, James.
No problem. How you doing, Pooja?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Should I go ahead and start sharing screen?
Yep, you can start doing that. I'm going to go ahead and mute my line. Do we have Tim? Is he?
Yeah. Hey, everyone.
Hey, I hear you. And now I see you. There he is. How you doing, Tim?
Pretty good. How are you?
Great. Okay. You guys take over. Thanks.
Thanks, James. Hi there. I'm Pooja Ranjan here to talk about the Ethereum Roadmap, and I would be talking on improvement proposals and the process improvements. A quick recap from where we stopped last time in my last talk on EA educational series, Improving Ethereum with EIPs. If any of you may have watched it earlier, we finished up at the big picture describing the EIP standardization and the network upgrade process. Not much have changed since then. However, minor changes in naming different phases can be found here. A few weeks ago, Tim Bako started a magician thread to continue discussion on the timeline and naming of upcoming Ethereum upgrades. If you're interested to add your suggestions or might want to follow along what's going on, in here, a link is provided in the slides. With my presentation today, I'm going to talk about the changes in the EIP documentation. Ethereum Improvement Proposal, EIP, documents the proposals that are there for the improvement of Ethereum chain. It has been recently brought to our attention that sometimes it is difficult for an EIP to stay up to date with respect to changing specs. In a conversation with Eric Marks and Morris on the Peep and Nape show for EIP 1474, which is actually an interface EIP, this was brought to attention to a broader audience. And we started discussing this more. During the implementation of EIP 1559 for the 11 upgrade, some group came together and they started exploring options to standardize JSON RPC API specification so that it could be implemented by Ethereum tool providers. Expected changes in the standardization process. Let's talk about the core proposals first. Now that we have two chains, Ethereum 1.0 and Ethereum 2.0, which is also known as Beacon chain. So the 1.0, which is also a future execution layer chain, follows the traditional network upgrade process, the diagram shown in the earlier slide. For Ethereum 2.0, Altair chain, they are using a little different approach for this upgrade. This is their first upgrade, and they are making pull requests directly to the Ethereum 2 specifications. There is some work being put in by Consensus Quill team to document the Ethereum specification to be maintained as Python libraries. So in future, Ethereum 1.0 can also be flexible about changing their specs, and they do not have to go through the entire EIP process. The interface proposal, where we identified the gap for the first time, we at the moment to resolve the conflict, people think that it's better to divide it into two different categories. One, proposals which are directly related to JSON RPC, and move them out of the EIP's GitHub repository that will be maintained on a separate repository at ETH 1.0 specs, and rest of the interface level will still be available at eips.ethereum.org. However, for networking EIPs, not major changes are expected at this point of time. They will be following the standard core proposals, and because they are completely disassociated with the upgrade, so it's completely on the client to implement the proposal as they go. There is this another major category, I must say, is Ethereum request for comment. It's a very big one because there are almost equal number of proposals available as there is there in the core proposal section. These are the popular ERC category that many people may be aware of. I personally feel that some more documentation could be helpful to user community to understand what is ERC and how we can actually improve it. There are so many proposals which are in draft. They might want to be pushed into the final status. So I have documented here the issues, challenges, and some possible solutions that might be helpful for managing the Ethereum request for comments. On Meta EAP section, we may be seeing a big change. As of now, there are 10 proposals in final status, and out of 10, 9 are the upgrade related, which we are planning to move from the EIPS repository to Ethereum 1.0 spec repository as a upgrade.md file. And EIP1 is the only living Meta EIP that people are going to find in the Meta EIP category. As per the informational, it's ironic that we do not have any proposal in final category. However, EIP 2982, Serenity Phase 0, which is in last call, so we are expecting it to move it to the final phase really soon. Proto EIP is a way of proposing proposal before it is actually putting into a pull request form. Vitalik talked about Verkle tree EIP in a stateless meeting, and later on there is another Proto EIP published by Mikhail for the change of consensus mechanism. This is now merged, I think today morning itself, as EIP 3675 to the main repository. And we have recorded a very good episode for EIP 3675 in PEEP and eea-eth to explain what this proposal is all about. And a shameless plug for the show. We have recorded over 40 episodes of PEEP and eea-eth. This is all about Ethereum improvement proposals and upcoming upgrades. Give it a watch. It is available on Ethereum Cat Herders YouTube. You can go to the playlist called PEEP and eea-eth. I would love to leave with a big picture again. So this is the representation of network upgrades, future network upgrades. As per my understanding, I have tried to depict it in like a right time frame for whatever information we have collected so far. Tim Baiko will be talking more on this right after this presentation. I spent a decent amount of my work time with Ethereum Cat Herders community and also run the etherworld.co website. I'm on most social media, on Twitter and Medium. Follow me at poojaranjan19. Appreciate the opportunity to share the development on the process improvement and Ethereum blockchain. Over to you.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. My video's pinned. Yeah, so I'm going to walk through a bit of the Ethereum roadmap. Let me know if you cannot see my slides. Sorry. Okay, so you should see everything now. So I'm Tim Baiko. I run the core developer calls on Ethereum. So this is basically the calls where the different developers get together to decide what protocol changes happen on the network. And oh, sorry, I have an alarm on my phone. Yeah, if you want a copy of these slides, you can get them here. I have a bit.ly eth-july-2021. So there's a couple links in the slides. If you want to visit those after, you're free to. Because we're a bit short on time, I'll pass over the previous upgrades and just get to the stuff that's coming in the future. So first of all, we have this upgrade called London, which is coming not in Q2 or Q3, but actually next week on August 5th. This is one of the biggest upgrades we've ever had on the current Ethereum chain, where we're introducing a complete overhaul to how transaction fees work on Ethereum. So EIP 1559, which you've probably heard about before, basically adds an in protocol minimum price for transactions, which greatly improves how easy it is to estimate what's the right price you need to set when you're sending a transaction. So if you've ever sent a transaction on Ethereum, you've had this experience where like you send a transaction, it says it's going to confirm in 30 seconds, and then you refresh the page and now it's 2 minutes, you refresh again, it's 7 minutes. And this is due just to the dynamics of how kind of the auction model for transaction fees work on Ethereum right now. So 1559 aims to not only make it easier to figure out what's the right price, but also keep more kind of empty space in blocks on average so that we can include transactions quicker when they're submitted to the network. So this is the biggest change that's going as part of London. There's also a couple other smaller ones. EIP 3529 changes how gas refunds work at the network level. So right now, when you store data on the Ethereum network, it obviously costs you gas to do that. And there's always been this incentive in the network to clear your storage, and you would get a gas refund if you did that. So if you stored some data and then removed it, yeah, you would get a refund. But unfortunately, people have kind of abused this behavior where what they'll do now is when gas prices are quite low, they'll just fill the network up with kind of junk data so that they can then get a refund for that gas at a later date when gas prices are higher. And that creates instability on the network, not only because it kind of blows up the stake, but also because the execution from gas that's being refunded is not actually counted entirely towards the block gas limit. So right now, if you get kind of a refund on your gas during your transaction, and half of that can be applied to as more execution in that block, and that means that when we're thinking about things like raising the block gas limit and whatnot, it's very hard to reason about it because there's a lot of variance in like how big the actual blocks are, even though the gas limit is the same on all of them. So refunds kind of just increases the variance in the kind of actual amount of gas that's executed in the block. So by removing that, we kind of get just tighter bounds on the block size, and it helps in the future if we do want to raise the gas limit and whatnot. We can just reason about it a bit better. Third change that's coming into London is EIP 3554. So this pushes back the difficulty bomb. So we have this difficulty bomb in Ethereum, which is a mechanism where it makes mining on the network exponentially harder. And you can think of it as a very steep exponential curve. So for most of its life, the curve is basically flat. It doesn't actually affect mining, but then at some point the bomb goes off and then it becomes exponentially harder, quite quick to mine, up to a point where within a few months, it would just be impossible to mine on the network. The idea behind that was to facilitate the transition to proof of stake. So, to make it impossible to keep mining forever on Ethereum. So the bomb is going off this summer. We're obviously not ready to transition to proof of stake quite yet, but we will be soon. So we're kind of pushing it back to December. I think very optimistically we might have the transition then. More likely, we'll probably have to do one final pushback of the bomb in December for another few months, and that'll be the final one. And then finally, there's this other small change coming into London, which just reserves a certain starting sequence for smart contracts. So it makes it impossible to deploy contracts starting at that sequence so that we can use that in the future to identify kind of special smart contracts, which we can execute in a different way. So we're not actually implementing any of those new functionalities in London, but we're just saying, hey, we're going to reserve this starting byte sequence so that in the future we can use that as an identifier for new functionality. In parallel to all this, so this is everything that's happening on the current Ethereum proof of work chain. The proof of stake part of the system is having its first upgrade. So since its launch last December, it hasn't had a network upgrade yet, and there's not a date set yet, but in late August, early September, Altair will go live. And there's basically three main changes that are introduced. The first is adding functionality, which will enable us to build light clients for the beacon chain. So we're just going to add kind of some extra data that beacon chain validators need to report. That will make it easier to build light clients off of. The second is basically just some changes to how validator rewards and penalties are calculated. So because there's a large amount of validators on the network and they get a large amount of rewards and penalties, we don't actually calculate every single update to their balance every time there's a change. We try to batch those and optimize them. So we're improving that process there as well. And then lastly, and potentially most importantly, we're raising the penalties for inactivity and slashing. So when the beacon chain launched last December, there was a decision made to kind of lower the penalties if you do something wrong, because it was still new and experimental. Now that it's been up and running since then, we're basically cranking up those penalties up to their full level. With that being said, the next big thing on the roadmap is the merge. So the merge is taking the current Ethereum proof of work chain and combining it with the proof of stake chain. So once London and Altair are out, this will be the main focus of development teams on both sides. And we've already kind of seen our focus start to shift on that as the development work on these two upgrades is starting to wind up. And to explain the merge, it's kind of worth looking at like the Ethereum 2.0 roadmap and how it's evolved over time. I think a lot of people are still familiar with like the first iteration, or I guess the most popular iteration of the Ethereum 2.0 roadmap, which was to have phase 0, 1, and 2. So at first we wanted to have kind of phase 0, which was launching the proof of stake system, which we did. So it's the beacon chain, it's up, it's running. And then the plan was to add shards to this beacon chain system, which would only store data and not run computation. And eventually, as part of phase 2, to turn on computation in those shards, where they would transition from just storing data to actually running transactions. And this transition from phase 1 to phase 2 was always kind of the most complicated and underspecified bit. So as we were working on this, we've also seen some really good progress on scaling outside of Ethereum 2.0, and this was mostly through rollups. So over the past year or two, we've seen a ton of progress on rollups as a way that we can just scale computation on Ethereum. This is when you hear about layer 2, this is basically what it means. And we've started to see those kind of work in practice. They're live on the network today. So we had this shift of, instead of trying to scale computation through sharding, we could just use the current rollups that exist and have those be our main scaling solution. And so there was this proposal to basically say, let's keep the proof of stake engine, keep a single shard with the EVM in it, which is the current Ethereum shard as we know it, and use rollups to scale that. If we want to have data shards as well, we can have those, and they're actually quite useful for rollups because rollups generate a lot of data. So if there's a way for them to store data cheaply, we can reduce the end user costs. But this kind of greatly simplified the roadmap, where instead of trying to figure out how do you turn on computation across all of these shards, you basically outsource that to rollups, which are already live and running. And then kind of the final refinement of this idea was to say, instead of having the EVM run as a shard in this whole system, why don't we flip things around and keep the current kind of Ethereum model and simply change the consensus algorithm? So go from proof of work to proof of stake, but keep as much of a current architecture as possible. And one way to think about this is, and I guess the people on this call will know this, that Ethereum clients can already handle multiple consensus algorithms, right? So if you're running your private network on Ethereum, you're usually not running it on proof of work. You're probably using something like IBFT. A lot of the testnets on Ethereum use algorithms like Clique. So there's already this concept in an Ethereum client like eea-eth or Nethermind or Besu that the consensus algorithm is swappable. So the kind of final iterations on this roadmap was saying, well, why don't we just swap, proof of work to the proof of stake algorithm that's running on the beacon chain? And that's what we're going for right now.
Thanks, Tim.
So,
yeah, I
sorry,
know.
Am I out of time?
Yeah, we're out of time, and I'm sorry to, I don't want to cut you off, and we'd love to.
Sorry about that.
You're fine. But thanks for your time, Pooja, your information. I know you guys mentioned reach out for maybe some of your slides and information. And it's difficult to get all your information in a few minutes. Yep. So we know it again. Yeah. Thanks, Tim. Greatly appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care, Tim.